Think about the worst thing that has ever happened to you in your life. And then imagine having to retell that story over and over to strangers in incredibly intimidating settings. Now, try to imagine having to do that at 6 years old.
Stacey Baxter here with Magnolia Homes. I'm so excited to welcome you to the first episode of North State Hidden Heroes. Today, I am so excited to introduce you to Kimberly Johnson. She is making amazing transformation happen in this community, ripples that will fill for generations. She's definitely a North State hidden hero. When you say the worst thing that's ever happened to you and revisiting that and being so little, what do you really mean by that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's quite a jarring opening statement, right? It's quite a jarring statement to imagine the worst thing that's ever happened to you. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, for the majority of the kiddos that access our services, that's the reality, is that they're coming here to tell us the worst thing that's ever happened to them. And previously, before our organization was established, they were having to retell that story multiple times in the police department or the district attorney's office or at the children's services office or at the hospital. And now, as you can see, they're able to come into this setting that was really built for them, and they tell their story one time, and we bring all of those people in under our roof to come to the child and meet them where they are.
Is it really that prevalent?
It really is. I mean, we have over double the state average per capita of rates of child abuse in Shasta County compared to the rest of the state of California.
So what was your beginning vision when you started the Children's Legacy Center?
You know, believe it or not, it really wasn't my beginning vision. I heard multiple leaders in our community come together and say that a children's advocacy center is the greatest need that we have in Shasta County. And that was in March of 2016, and basically like banged the door down of my friend at Children's Services and just begged to help and be a part of establishing this organization, not really knowing where it would lead. And so it started with a desire to take meeting minutes, and of course has now become a huge part of my heart and vision and continues to be, but it didn't start out that way.
That's amazing, and it sounds expensive. So where does this money come from?
It's a great question. So I am passionate about doing all that we can to limit the resources that we're pulling from our local community. In terms of that includes our city and our county. We have worked really hard and are very proud of the fact that we have brought in approximately $6 million into Shasta County from both state and federal grant funds. I think there's a point that I would really just like to clarify, because I have a huge value for integrity and transparency, especially when it comes to dollars, especially as a nonprofit. And so of the $6 million, we've had almost a little over $2 million so far, and then we have about another $4 million that's slotted over the next 2 years. So it's about $6 million total as an organization.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I love about you, your integrity. Okay, so back to that 6-year-old. So I'm a 6-year-old little girl. I've been through the worst thing in my life. I'm pulling up into the parking lot at the CLC. Take me through it. What does that process look like?
Yeah, so in order for a kiddo to come to the CLC, it's important to know we can receive referrals from child welfare, from law enforcement, and then from our local First Nations tribal community. Those are kind of our 3 inroads into our organization. So people can't just call and request a forensic interview, right? And so a kiddo and their family will come in. They are met at the front desk by Jana, who is our intake coordinator, and she's like meeting sunshine. I mean, she's just right? Like, she's just so magical. And she will give them a tour of the building. It's really important to kind of lay the groundwork of where they are and make them feel kind of grounded in where they are and let them have a spatial awareness. And then they come into our family waiting room that has rocking chairs in there, because that really helps with trauma. And then she'll sit down and she'll talk with the family a little bit. She'll do intake and let them know that Tracy is our forensic interviewer, and she's going to be in the room in a few minutes to come and talk to the kiddo and meet with the kiddo a bit. And Tracy will talk to the family, and then she goes and takes the kiddo into our forensic interview room. And the interview room itself is a really important part. The technology behind what we do is really important to reduce the trauma to the kiddos. So the kiddos will come into the forensic interview room, which is set up with cameras, and then down the hall you have law enforcement, and you have the DA's office, and you have crime victims assistants, and they're all there watching that interview take place live, and they're able to feed questions into our forensic interviewer through an earpiece. And so that's really how we get the reduction of multiple interviews.
So tell me more about the not so pretty side of what you do here.
We have intentionally invested a lot in order to be able to have phenomenal technology that allows for this very fact-finding, evidence-driven conversation that is had in a forensic interview, and ensuring that a child is able to tell their own story while we do everything on our end to ensure that everything is in place, kind of behind the scenes that they never see other than the cameras on the walls, which we point out to them because it's important for transparency, and there's nothing hidden in our space. But absolutely, there's so much happening kind of on the back end side of things because it's a part of the investigative process, right? And then the other piece too is understanding that we do provide medical collection, evidence collection here as well, which is always such a, every time I've ever given a tour in the building, every time we go in the medical exam room, it's always heavy for everyone that goes in, right? So we do provide, through collaboration and partnership with the forensic care team out of Shasta Community Health Center here in town, which is just a phenomenal resource that we have in our community. We are able to provide pediatric sexual assault exams, pediatric suspected child abuse and neglect exams, and then through this phenomenal work that Dr. Sean Dugan and his team are doing, even pediatric strangulation exams as well, which is absolutely, like, you can feel the weight of that. And so just like with everything else, we've done everything we can to be trauma informed. But honestly, I'm such a big believer that, the details really matter, and it's the little things that make you great. We had commissioned these Lego courtrooms, and they're literally exact replicas of the courtroom where kiddos are having to testify and tell these stories. And that's a whole other category, right? Potentially to a jury and all of the things that come with that in that process. But it's very much, just as much as we love the beauty of the facade that you're seeing on the outside when you walk in, there's the hard and there's the trauma on my staff and our team and everyone. And then there's a lot of the technology and the things in the walls that make this place work.
So what are your goals right now for the CLC, and where are you guys headed next?
Well, I would love to say that we have worked ourselves out of a job and there is not a need for this anymore in our community. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And so we are expanding as an organization. Our first goal was to ensure that we were reducing trauma to kiddos who were having to retell their story. We're super grateful that because of our partners, we have been able to accomplish that, and we'll continue to carry on that work. The next step is, how can we bring restoration? And so we have a couple of job positions open right now for mental health clinicians in order to be able to build out a rather comprehensive mental health program here at the Children's Legacy Center. And then kind of the part two of that is we are piloting a Northern California model for exploited youth that really is going to help meet the needs of placements and actual bed space. So that gets into kind of that's our next layer of growth. But it's important to note that this work that we're doing here will forever be the sun by which we orbit around, and it will forever be why we were created. And so we will always prioritize these kiddos in our community not having to be re-traumatized during this process.
So I'm sure anyone who's been watching is dying to know what they can do to get involved and support what you're doing here.
Be vigilant in our community to keep an eye out and understand that this is happening here.
Sometimes I even tell my kids, like, you're the people who might be the person to make us aware of this.
Absolutely, yeah. Kids will tell their friends, like a very common way that kiddos come here. A kiddo tells their friend tells their parent, and then they end up here. And so 100% yes to what you just said. So have these conversations with your kids around the dinner table. Talk about hard things. That's really where this begins. And it really, honestly, is the biggest hope is that the community as a whole recognizes that this is happening and becomes kind of the frontline heroes so kiddos never have to come through our doors.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for watching our first episode of North State Hidden Heroes. I told you this girl's amazing. Kimberly Johnson, when I describe her, I say she's grit and she's grace. And what's happening here wouldn't have happened without her getting behind it and being this like little whirlwind. So I'm so happy for you to meet her. I'm so happy for you to know what you're driving by when you roll into downtown and the big things that are happening here to create ripples in our community that I know are gonna last for decades and generations. Thanks for watching.
Thank you. Thanks, Stacy.